I watched the notification appear on my phone, a surge of disbelief and vindication washing over me as the headline flashed across the screen. Next Gen Acquisitions purchases Meridian Industries for $350 million. My husband Daniel's company, the one he had prioritized over our marriage for 8 years, had just been acquired by my investment firm. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who had looked me in the eyes on our 10th anniversary and said, "Rebecca, planning budgets for household expenses doesn't qualify you to lecture me about business strategy," now unknowingly answered to me as his company's majority shareholder. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 7 years ago, Daniel and I were celebrating our anniversary at Castellano's, an upscale restaurant downtown where he'd proposed years earlier. I'd spent the afternoon preparing for our date, hoping this would be the night we reconnected after months of growing distance. I'd even prepared a presentation on my laptop about a promising investment opportunity I'd researched for weeks, a small tech startup with an innovative approach to renewable energy storage. I was excited to share my findings with Daniel, hoping to rekindle the intellectual partnership we'd once shared. "I've been looking into this company called EcoVolt," I began carefully after we'd ordered dessert. "Their battery technology could revolutionize residential solar. The patents alone are worth—" Daniel's laugh cut me off mid-sentence. Not a genuine laugh of amusement, but the dismissive chuckle he'd developed since becoming CEO of Meridian Industries, the laugh that made board members and employees alike shrink in their seats. "Becca," he said, using the nickname he knew I'd grown to dislike, "I appreciate the effort, but let's be realistic about your expertise here." He took a slow sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've been a housewife for 6 years. A good one. And that's important, but just a housewife nonetheless. Leave the investment decisions to those of us who do this professionally." The words, "just a housewife," hung in the air between us. I felt heat rising to my cheeks, remembering my MBA from Wharton and my 4 years at Blackstone before our daughter, Emma, was born. The way he said it, as if managing our home, raising our child, and supporting his career required no intelligence or skill, made something shift inside me, a tectonic plate of resentment finally breaking loose after years of pressure. "I have an MBA, Daniel. I worked in private equity before Emma." "That was years ago," he interrupted, checking his watch. "The market's completely different now. You've been out of the loop." He signaled for the check, effectively ending the conversation. "Oh, can you make sure my gray suit is dry cleaned for Thursday? I have the investors' meeting." That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of our bedroom in the luxury home his salary had provided. The bedroom I had designed, in the home I had transformed from an empty house to a sanctuary, all while he worked 14-hour days building Meridian. I realized with startling clarity that our marriage had become transactional. My value, measured by how well I managed his home and supported his ambitions while suppressing my own. I'd given up my career when Emma was born, a decision we'd made together. "Just until she starts school," Daniel had said. "Then you can go back part-time if you want." But when that time came, there was always a reason why it wasn't practical. Daniel's increasing travel schedule, Emma's activities, the social obligations that came with his position. Slowly, imperceptibly, "if you want" had transformed into "if you insist," and finally into dismissal of the very idea. 2 weeks after our anniversary dinner, I found myself sitting across from Vivian Torres, my former roommate from business school, who now ran a successful investment advisory firm. I hadn't planned to contact her, but the research I'd done on EcoVolt kept pulling at me, the numbers making more sense the deeper I dug. "These projections are solid," Vivian said, reviewing my analysis in the quiet corner of a cafe far from my usual haunts. Your instincts about their battery technology are spot on. They're flying under the radar because the founders don't fit the usual Silicon Valley profile. So I'm not crazy? I asked, only half joking. Vivian closed my laptop and leaned forward. Rebecca, you were one of the sharpest analysts in our class. That brain doesn't just disappear because you've been managing a household for a few years. She paused, studying me. Why are you bringing this to me and not investing yourself? I stared into my untouched coffee. Daniel manages our investments. He thinks I'm out of touch. Vivian's expression hardened. She'd met Daniel several times and had never bothered to hide her assessment of him as brilliant but condescending. So prove him wrong, she said simply. How? I don't have access to significant capital of my own. Vivian tilted her head. Don't you? What about your inheritance from your grandmother? My grandmother had left me $175,000 when she passed away 3 years ago. It wasn't a fortune, but it was sitting untouched in a separate account, the one financial asset that was solely in my name. Daniel had suggested using it for a kitchen renovation or as a down payment on a vacation home, but I'd never felt comfortable committing it to anything that felt like a joint asset. It's not enough to make a meaningful investment, I hedged. It absolutely is, Vivian countered. Especially if you're strategic. Let me introduce you to some people. That meeting became the first domino in a sequence I couldn't have predicted. Vivian connected me with a small investment group focusing on overlooked opportunities, companies founded by women, minorities, and older entrepreneurs who struggled to get traditional venture capital attention despite solid business models and demonstrable results. Using my grandmother's inheritance as initial capital, I made my first investment in EcoVolt, following a week of intensive due diligence that rekindled my passion for financial analysis. I worked while Emma was at school and Daniel was at the office, converting our rarely used home office into my workspace. When Daniel noticed the activity, I simply mentioned I was getting organized and exploring some online courses. Both technically true, if significantly understated. Within 6 months, EcoVolt secured a major contract with a European energy company, and my initial investment doubled in value. Rather than withdrawing the profit, I reinvested in 2 more companies, identified by the investment group, now participating more actively in their research process. At home, little changed. Daniel remained consumed by Meridian's expansion, missing dinners and school events with increasing frequency. On the rare evenings he was home early enough to talk, he spoke almost exclusively about his company's challenges and triumphs, showing polite but minimal interest in my day or Emma's activities. I stopped trying to discuss business or investments entirely, not out of defeat, but strategy. By the 1-year anniversary of my first investment, my portfolio had grown to just over $400,000, and I had joined forces with Vivian and 3 other investors to formalize our collaboration as Ascend Capital partners. My role was initially part-time, conducting analysis from home while maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed in my daily routine. The only person who knew the full truth was Emma, now 12 and remarkably perceptive. She'd found me, working late one night, spreadsheets open on my laptop. "Are you doing Dad's work for him?" she asked, padding into the office in her pajamas. "No, honey, this is my work. My own project," I explained, unsure how much to share with my child about the growing divide between her parents. Emma studied the screen with interest. "Is it a secret?" I considered this question carefully. "Not exactly. It's just something I'm doing for myself right now, and I'd prefer to keep it private until it's more established." She nodded solemnly. "Like when I was writing my book last year and didn't want anyone to read it until it was done." I smiled, relieved at her understanding. Very similar. Sometimes we need to develop our ideas in private before sharing them with the world. Does Dad know? The question was innocent but piercing. "Not yet," I admitted. I'm waiting for the right time to tell him. Emma accepted this with the pragmatic resilience unique to children of strained marriages. "Your secret's safe with me, Mom," she said, miming zipping her lips before kissing my cheek and returning to bed. Her simple acceptance strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just building a financial future for myself. I was showing my daughter what it meant to reclaim your power and pursue your passions, even when those closest to you have stopped seeing your potential. As Ascend Capital grew, so did the challenge of maintaining my double life. I began attending investor meetings while Daniel thought I was at yoga or volunteer committees. I conducted conference calls from my car or from Vivian's office. The irony wasn't lost on me, using the very housewife activities Daniel dismissed as cover for building the career he thought I was incapable of resuming. 3 years after our anniversary dinner, Ascend Capital had evolved from an informal collaboration into a respected boutique investment firm with a growing reputation for identifying overlooked opportunities. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My initial $175,000 had multiplied into several million through a combination of smart investments and my increasing role as a partner in the firm. We'd moved to a proper office downtown, and I had gradually adjusted my schedule to be there 3 days a week while Emma was at school, explaining to Daniel that I'd taken on a part-time position, helping Vivian with some administrative work. He'd been supportive in that distracted way of someone who sees your activities as inconsequential, a hobby to keep me occupied rather than serious professional engagement. "That's great, honey," he'd said when I mentioned the job. "It'll be good for you to get out of the house more." The condescension in his tone might have stung if I hadn't been secretly amused by how completely he'd underestimated the situation. As my professional confidence grew, the distance in my marriage widened. Daniel and I operated in increasingly separate spheres, our conversations limited to logistics about Emma and social obligations. I found myself less hurt by his dismissive attitude and more bemused by it. The woman he saw when he looked at me, the supportive wife whose intellect extended no further than household management, was a fiction that bore less resemblance to reality with each passing month. The true turning point came unexpectedly, at a charity gala for the city's children's hospital. Daniel had been asked to attend as Meridian Industries was a major donor, and I accompanied him as expected. While he networked with potential clients near the bar, I found myself face-to-face with Lawrence Jenkins, the founder of Next Gen Acquisitions and one of the most influential investors in our region. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted me, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." For a moment I panicked, wondering if he would inadvertently reveal my double life. I had met Lawrence twice through Ascend Capital, but always as Rebecca Winters, using my maiden name professionally to maintain separation between my investment activities and my married identity. "Mr. Jenkins," I replied carefully, "I'm here with my husband. He's the Meridian Industries connection." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something like respect. "Ah, I see. Your husband is Daniel Carter? Interesting." He studied me with new intensity. "Your reputation precedes you in certain circles, though perhaps not in this particular context." "I appreciate your discretion," I said quietly. He nodded slightly. Separate worlds often make for complicated lives but fascinating strategies. "Perhaps we should discuss a potential collaboration sometime. My office has your contact information." As he moved away, I caught Daniel watching the exchange with curiosity. "How do you know Lawrence Jenkins?" he asked when I rejoined him. "Vivian introduced us," I said truthfully. "His foundation works with the literacy program I volunteer with." Another technical truth, though not the primary connection. Daniel seemed satisfied with the explanation, even pleased. "Good connection to have. His firm has been acquiring companies in our sector. Meridian's too big a target for them now, but still, Never hurts to be on friendly terms with the sharks. I smiled, sipping my champagne to hide my expression. If only he knew that I had recently participated in a meeting where NextGen's acquisition strategy had been discussed in detail, or that Meridian had indeed been mentioned as a potential target, not for its current performance, but for its undervalued intellectual property and market position. 2 weeks after the gala, Lawrence Jenkins called with a proposition that would change everything. "Rebecca, we're moving forward with an acquisition strategy in the industrial automation sector, and Meridian fits our portfolio needs. Would Ascend be interested in participating as a partner in this venture?" The question left me momentarily speechless. Participating would mean directly investing in the acquisition of my husband's company, a company he had built over the past decade, often at the expense of our marriage and family life. "I'd need to review the details," I said carefully. "There are obviously some personal complications." "Of course," Lawrence replied. "But consider this. Your insight into Meridian's true value proposition could be invaluable to structuring a fair deal. One that would benefit their shareholders, their employees, and yes, their executive leadership." I promised to think about it, and spent the next week in careful analysis, not just of Meridian's financials, which I reviewed with fresh eyes, but of my own motivations. Was I considering this out of vengeance? A desire to prove something to Daniel? Or because it genuinely represented a sound investment decision? After days of contemplation and discussions with Vivian, I concluded it was primarily the latter. Meridian had strong fundamentals, but was struggling with debt from over-aggressive expansion. Exactly the kind of company that could benefit from NextGen's restructuring expertise while providing solid returns to investment partners. My personal connection was both a complication and an advantage. I understood the company's potential in ways outside investors might miss. Ascend Capital partnered with NextGen on the acquisition, with my firm taking a 15% stake in the deal. Through a series of holding companies and investment vehicles, my name remained absent from any paperwork that might cross Daniel's desk during the increasingly intense negotiations that followed. As Meridian's CEO, he fought the acquisition vigorously at first, then strategically as it became clear that some form of buyout was inevitable. I watched from a careful distance as he navigated the professional challenge, arriving home increasingly late, more distracted than ever. Twice he mentioned vulture capitalists trying to undervalue Meridian's worth. Once he referred to the lead negotiator as surprisingly well-informed about our internal operations. I offered sympathy without commentary, a supportive spouse, without relevant expertise, the role he had assigned me years ago. The acquisition was finalized on a Tuesday morning. By afternoon, the business news outlets had announced it, and Daniel had called to say he would be late. Meetings with the new ownership group would continue through dinner. What he didn't yet know was that tomorrow's meetings would include introductions to key investment partners, including a representative from Ascend Capital. I sat in our home office that evening, staring at the notification on my phone that had started this reflection, feeling an odd mixture of triumph and sadness. The woman dismissed as just a housewife had just become one of the key shareholders in her husband's company. Tomorrow, Daniel would learn that the business acumen he had belittled had been quietly compounding all along, growing from a modest inheritance into a financial force capable of participating in a 9-figure acquisition. Yet my predominant emotion wasn't gloating or vengeance, but a strange sense of liberation. The secrecy that had initially been necessary for my confidence had become a burden. Whatever happened next, whether our marriage survived this revelation or not, at least the truth of who I was and what I had built would finally be acknowledged. Emma found me still sitting there, lost in thought. Now 15, she had grown into a perceptive young woman who missed very little. "Is everything okay, Mom?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. I looked up and smiled. "Yes, actually. Remember that secret project I started a few years ago? I think it's finally time. to share it with the world. The morning after the acquisition announcement, I woke before sunrise. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with scenarios of how Daniel would react when he discovered my involvement with NextGen. Would he be angry? Impressed? Would he see it as betrayal or brilliance? I had no way to predict which version of my husband would emerge from the shock of realization. I slipped out of bed quietly, leaving Daniel still asleep. The previous night, he'd returned home after midnight, exhausted from hours of meetings with NextGen's transition team. He'd mumbled something about more tomorrow before falling into bed without even removing his tie. I'd gently untied it for him, a wifely gesture that felt like a final performance of a role I was about to redefine. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee and reviewed my notes for the day ahead. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at NextGen's downtown offices, a formal introduction between Meridian's executive team and key investment partners behind the acquisition. Lawrence had arranged for me to attend as Rebecca Winters, managing partner at Ascend Capital, my identity as Daniel's wife temporarily obscured to allow the professional revelations to occur first. "Is Dad still asleep?" Emma asked, patting into the kitchen in her school uniform. Despite the early hour, she was already fully dressed, her backpack packed for school. "Yes, he had a late night with the acquisition meetings," I replied, sliding a plate of eggs toward her. "Are you going to tell him today?" she asked, her perceptiveness once again catching me off guard. I looked at my daughter, wondering when she had become so attuned to the complexities of adult relationships. "How much do you know about what's happening with Dad's company?" Emma shrugged. "I know your investment firm is involved in buying Meridian. I heard you on the phone with Aunt Vivian last week." She took a bite of eggs, watching me carefully. "Also, I may have looked at some papers on your desk." Rather than scolding her for snooping, I found myself impressed by her initiative. "And what do you think about that?" She considered the question with surprising maturity. "I think Dad underestimated you, and now he's going to find out how wrong he was." She paused, pushing her eggs around the plate. "Is this going to make things worse between you two?" The question struck at the heart of my own uncertainty. "I don't know, honey. It might be difficult at first. Your father doesn't like surprises, especially ones that challenge how he sees himself. Or me. But you're not doing this to hurt him, right?" Her eyes, so like Daniel's, searched mine for reassurance. "No," I said firmly. "I'm doing this because it's a good business decision, and because I'm tired of hiding my capabilities. The fact that it involves your father's company is complicated, but it wasn't the primary motivation." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied. "For what it's worth, Mom, I think you're awesome, and maybe Dad needs to see that too." Her simple vote of confidence steadied me. Whatever happened today, Emma understood that reclaiming my identity wasn't an act of vengeance but of self-respect. After dropping Emma at school, I drove to Vivian's house to prepare. We had agreed it would be better to get ready away from home, reducing the chance of Daniel noticing anything unusual about my appearance or demeanor. I changed into the charcoal Armani suit and emerald silk blouse I'd brought with me. Professional. Attire I normally kept at my office but had quietly retrieved the previous day. "Ready for this?" Vivian asked as she helped me fasten a simple pearl necklace, a gift from my grandmother years ago. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, studying my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked confident, professional, so different from the carefully maintained image of Daniel's wife I'd projected for years. "Do you think it's wrong, blindsiding him this way?" Vivian considered the question seriously. "Would he have ever truly seen your capabilities if you'd tried to show him gradually? You gave him opportunities to recognize your intellect, Rebecca. He chose to dismiss it." She was right. I'd made multiple attempts over the years to engage Daniel in serious discussions about business and investments. Each time, he'd responded with the same patronizing attitude he'd displayed at our anniversary dinner. The direct approach had failed. Perhaps shock was the only tactic left. We arrived at NextGen's offices 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting. Lawrence greeted us in the reception area, his usual commanding presence tempered by unusual concern. "Rebecca, are you certain about this approach?" he asked as he escorted us to a private conference room adjacent to the main meeting space. "We could still adjust the introductions, perhaps meet with Daniel privately first." "No," I said firmly. "I've thought this through. Everything needs to happen in the proper context. Professional first, personal second. If we tell him privately, it becomes a marital issue rather than a business reality." Lawrence nodded, respecting my decision. "Very well. The Meridian team is already in the main conference room. We'll bring them in here for the partner introductions in about 20 minutes. Left alone with Vivian, I paced the room, rehearsing what I would say when the moment came. No scenario I imagined seemed adequate to bridge the gap between the woman Daniel thought I was and the business partner I had become. At precisely 10 a.m., Lawrence returned with his executive team. "They're ready. The Meridian executives are waiting next door. We'll go through our standard introductions and then bring in the investment partners one by one." I would be the last to enter, giving me a few precious minutes to prepare while the other investors were introduced. Through the partially open door, I could hear the formal exchanges beginning, the practiced corporate language creating a familiar rhythm. Lawrence's deep voice carried clearly as he explained the acquisition structure and introduced the first, investment partner. Then, suddenly, I heard Daniel's voice, confident, engaged, the tone he reserved for important business interactions. "We're particularly interested in understanding the growth strategy post-acquisition. Meridian has several product lines in development that could significantly expand market share with proper capitalization." The professional assurance in his voice reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with years ago, before success had hardened him into someone who could dismiss his wife's intellect so casually. I felt a momentary twinge of doubt. Was I about to destroy whatever remained of our marriage? Vivian seemed to read my thoughts. "You've earned this moment, Rebecca. Not just the business success, but the recognition." Before I could respond, Lawrence appeared at the door. "We're ready for you now, Rebecca." Taking a deep breath, I stood and smoothed my suit jacket. The short walk to the conference room door felt like crossing a threshold between two lives, the compliant wife I had been, and the accomplished investor I had become. The conversation in the room halted as I entered. 8 men in suits turned toward me, most with expressions of polite interest. Only Daniel's face registered something different, confusion followed by dawning recognition. "Our final investment partner," Lawrence announced smoothly, "Rebecca Winters, managing partner of Ascend Capital, which holds a 15% stake in the acquisition vehicle." I kept my eyes on Lawrence for a moment longer, gathering courage, before allowing my gaze to meet Daniel's across the polished expanse of the conference table. His expression had transformed from confusion to disbelief, then to something more complex, shock mixed with the beginning edges of comprehension. "Thank you, Lawrence," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I'm pleased to formally join. These discussions, though I've been following Meridian's performance with interest for some time." Daniel's mouth opened slightly, but no words emerged. The other executives from Meridian looked between us, sensing tension but unaware of its source. Lawrence continued the introductions smoothly. "Ms. Winters brings particular expertise in identifying undervalued intellectual property assets and optimizing organizational structures for innovation. Her firm's analysis of Meridian's potential was instrumental in our acquisition decision." I took the empty seat directly across from Daniel, maintaining eye contact. "Meridian has built impressive technical capabilities," I said, addressing the entire room but speaking primarily to my husband. "However, Its aggressive expansion created debt burdens that obscured the core value of its innovation pipeline. Our analysis suggests that with proper restructuring and strategic focus, Meridian's true value could be realized much more effectively. Daniel's face had drained of color, but his professional training held. You seem remarkably well-informed about our operations, Ms. Winters, he managed, emphasizing my maiden name with subtle emphasis. I believe in thorough research, I replied evenly, particularly when significant investment capital is at stake. The meeting proceeded with excruciating professionalism, each side presenting initial views on transition plans and integration strategies. I contributed several substantive points about Meridian's R&D priorities and market positioning, demonstrating knowledge that could only have come from years of careful attention to the company's operations. Throughout the discussion, I could feel Daniel watching me, his initial shock evolving into something harder to read. The other executives remained oblivious to the personal drama unfolding silently across the conference table, focused entirely on the business implications of the acquisition. After 90 minutes of discussion, Lawrence called for a short break. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes to discuss next steps, he announced, giving me the signal we had agreed upon, a window for Daniel and me to have our inevitable private conversation. As the room emptied, Daniel remained seated, his eyes never leaving mine. When the door closed behind the last departing executive, silence enveloped us completely. Rebecca, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. What is this? This is my investment firm participating in the acquisition of a promising company with underutilized assets, I replied calmly. Don't, he cut me off sharply. Don't. Pretend this is just business. You're my wife. You've been… What? Running a secret investment firm? Targeting my company? I took a measured breath. I founded Ascend Capital with Vivian 4 years ago, initially using my inheritance from grandmother as seed capital. And no, we didn't target Meridian specifically. NextGen approached us because of our track record with similar acquisitions and our expertise in your industry sector. 4 years, he repeated, the implications sinking in. All those times you were at yoga or volunteer committees? I was building a successful investment firm that now manages over $80 million in assets, I completed for him. The part-time job with Vivian wasn't entirely fiction, just significantly understated. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from moments when he felt control slipping away. Why the secrecy? Why not tell me? The question hung between us, deceptively simple yet impossibly complex. I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. Do you remember our anniversary dinner at Castellano's? When I tried to discuss the EcoVolt investment opportunity? His brow furrowed, clearly struggling to recall a conversation he had dismissed as insignificant. You told me I was just a housewife and should leave investment decisions to those who do it professionally. I reminded him quietly. That wasn't the first time you'd dismissed my business acumen, but it was the moment I decided to stop seeking your validation. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by defensiveness. That was one comment. Rebecca, you built an entire secret life based on one thoughtless remark? No, Daniel. I built a successful business based on my expertise and instincts, the very capabilities you repeatedly dismissed. The secrecy wasn't the point. It was simply necessary because you had made it clear you wouldn't take me seriously. He sat back, absorbing this. So this is what? Revenge? You wanted to humiliate me by buying my company? This isn't about you, I said firmly. It never was. It's about me refusing to be defined by your limitations. The fact that our paths have intersected professionally is circumstantial, though I won't deny a certain poetic justice to the timing. Daniel's expression hardened. Poetic justice. That's what our marriage has come to? You orchestrating some elaborate gotcha moment in front of my colleagues? No one else in that room knows I'm your wife, I corrected him. I've been careful to maintain that separation. This meeting could have been just like any other corporate acquisition. Professional, impersonal. The personal dimension exists, only between us. He looked at me with new intensity, as if truly seeing me for the first time in years. I don't even know who you are anymore. That's the point, Daniel. You never really did. The words came out softer than I intended, tinged with sadness rather than triumph. You saw what you expected to see. A housewife who managed your home and raised your child. You never looked deeper because you never valued what might be there. Before he could respond, a gentle knock at the door signaled the end of our private moment. Lawrence peered in, his expression carefully neutral. We're ready to resume if you are. Daniel straightened his tie, his face rearranging into the mask of professional composure I had seen countless times. We'll be right there, he replied, his voice betraying nothing of our conversation. As Lawrence withdrew, Daniel turned back to me. This isn't finished. No, I agreed, standing to straighten my suit. But right now, we have a business meeting to complete. I suggest we both focus on our professional responsibilities and continue our personal discussion at home. He nodded curtly, and we rejoined. The meeting, maintaining an impeccable facade of professional courtesy that revealed nothing of the seismic shift in our personal relationship. I presented a Sen's perspective on Meridian's restructuring needs with clarity and insight. Daniel responded with thoughtful questions about implementation timelines and personnel impacts. Anyone observing would have seen only two accomplished professionals engaging in standard acquisition dialogue. When the meeting concluded 3 hours later, Daniel and I left separately. He had additional discussions scheduled with NextGen's technical team. I had arranged to meet Vivian to debrief. We exchanged no personal words, only a business-like nod acknowledging our agreement to continue our conversation later. Well? Vivian asked when I met her at our office afterward. How bad was it? Controlled nuclear explosion, I replied, sinking into my office chair. He's shocked, angry, confused, all the things we expected, but he kept it professional in the meeting. And now? Now we finish the conversation at home, without the corporate audience. Vivian studied me carefully. Are you prepared for where this might lead? For what it might mean for your marriage? The question struck at the heart of what I had been avoiding. In building Ascend, in participating in the Meridian acquisition, I had been focused on reclaiming my professional identity. I had given less thought to what it would mean for my personal life, for the future of a marriage that had long since ceased to resemble a partnership of equals. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me hopes this will be a wake-up call for Daniel, that seeing me as a competent professional might remind him of the woman he fell in love with. But another part wonders if we've grown too far apart, if the woman I've become is someone he can't accept. Whatever happens, Vivian said gently, you've already won the more important battle. You've reclaimed yourself. I nodded, gathering my things to head home for the inevitable confrontation. Keep your phone on. I may need moral support later. The house was quiet when I arrived home. Emma had texted earlier that she was going to her friend Zoe's house after school to work on a science project, an arrangement that now seemed providentially timed. I had a few hours to prepare before Daniel returned from his meetings. I changed from my business attire into casual clothes, not wanting the conversation to feel like a continuation of our professional confrontation. In the kitchen, I automatically began preparing dinner, a habit so ingrained that I was chopping vegetables before I consciously questioned whether this was the right approach. Would cooking dinner undermine the professional identity I had just revealed? Would it reinforce the housewife role I was trying to transcend? I set down the knife, realizing I was overthinking routine actions. Preparing dinner wasn't a submission. It was simply part of family life. The problem had never been the domestic activities themselves, but the assumption that they defined the limits of my capabilities. when I heard Daniel's key in the lock 3. Hours later, I was sitting at the kitchen island with financial reports spread before me, not staged for his benefit, but because I had actual work to complete while waiting. I didn't pretend to put them away as he entered, a small but deliberate change from my usual routine of clearing any personal activities to focus on his arrival. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, me surrounded by financial documents, reading glasses perched on my nose, a half-empty glass of wine at my elbow. For years, his arrival home had been met with my full attention, my own activities, immediately subordinated to his needs and schedule. "We need to talk," he said, loosening his tie. "Yes," I agreed, removing my glasses but not clearing away my work. "We do." He moved to the refrigerator, pulling out a beer before sitting across from me at the island. 4 years, he began, echoing his earlier comment. 4 years of lies. Not lies, I corrected. Omissions. I never fabricated anything. I simply didn't share the full scope of my activities. That's semantics, Rebecca. You deliberately kept me in the dark about something major. Yes, I acknowledged. I did. Because you had made it abundantly clear that you didn't consider my business acumen worth taking seriously. He took a long pull from his beer. One dismissive comment at dinner doesn't justify years of deception. It wasn't one comment, Daniel. It was a pattern. Every time I tried to engage you on business topics, you patronized me. When I suggested investment strategies, you laughed them off. You treated me like an amusing child playing at adult concepts. That's not fair, he protested, but with less conviction than before. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked my opinion about anything more significant than dinner plans or Emma's school activities? When did you last treat me as an intellectual? Equal? He was silent, unable to produce a recent example. The irony, I continued, is that while you were dismissing my insights at home, I was building a firm that achieved a 32% average annual return on investments, significantly outperforming Meridian's growth during the same period. Daniel's expression shifted, the businessman in him unable to ignore the impressiveness of those numbers. 32%? Consistently? Verified by independent auditors, I confirmed. It turns out that being just a housewife provides excellent training for identifying undervalued assets and efficient resource allocation. A ghost of a smile flickered across his face before disappearing. I still don't understand why you couldn't have told me once you started succeeding. Why maintain the secrecy after you'd proven your point? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the years. At first, it was because I needed to establish myself without your judgment or interference. Later, I suppose it became comfortable, having something that was entirely mine. Our marriage had become so unbalanced, with your career dominating everything. Ascend was my space, where I was valued for my mind, not my domestic capabilities. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, turning his beer bottle slowly between his hands. "I've been a terrible husband, haven't I?" he finally said, the question more rhetorical than actual. "Not terrible," I corrected gently. "Just increasingly absent, increasingly dismissive. We both let it happen. I retreated into secrecy rather than confronting the problem directly. And now you own 15% of my company," he said, a hint of incredulity returning to his voice. "Technically, Ascend owns 15% of the acquisition vehicle. That purchased Meridian," I clarified. "And before you ask, yes, the investment was made on solid business grounds, not as some elaborate revenge scheme. Meridian has valuable assets and technology that were being undermined by poor financial structure." He nodded slowly, the businessman acknowledging the accuracy of the assessment even as the husband still processed the personal implications. "What happens now? With us, I mean." It was the question I'd been expecting, yet still felt unprepared to answer. "I don't know," I admitted. That depends on both of us. On whether you can see me as I truly am now, not as the person you assumed I was. And on whether I can forgive the years of dismissal without harboring resentment. Do you still love me? He asked, vulnerability replacing his earlier defensiveness. The directness of the question caught me off guard. Did I still love Daniel? The ambitious, brilliant man I had married was still visible beneath the dismissive executive he had become. Our history together, the early years of partnership, the joy of raising Emma, couldn't be erased by the more recent distance. I love who we were, I said honestly. I love parts of who we are now. But I don't know if those parts are enough anymore. What about you? Can you love the woman who runs an investment firm rather than just your household? Can you respect my professional identity as much as you want me to respect yours? He reached across the island, his hand covering mine in a gesture that felt both familiar and strange after so many months of minimal physical contact. I'm angry about the secrecy, he admitted, and my ego is bruised, more than bruised, by how thoroughly I underestimated you. But beneath that, I'm impressed, Rebecca. What you've built while I wasn't paying attention is remarkable. It was the first genuine compliment he'd paid me in years that wasn't related to my appearance or domestic capabilities. The acknowledgement of my professional accomplishment felt like the first tentative bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. We have a lot to figure out, I said, turning my hand to squeeze his briefly before withdrawing. About our marriage, about our professional relationship now that Ascend is involved with Meridian. It won't be simple. No, he agreed. But simple has never been our style, has it? Even when we first met. The front door opened, interrupting whatever memory he had been about to invoke. Emma's voice called out, "I'm home. Is dinner happening or should I forage?" Daniel and I exchanged a look, silently agreeing to pause our conversation. Whatever reckoning lay ahead for our marriage, we would continue to present a united front for our daughter. "In the kitchen," I called back. "There's pasta on the stove." Emma appeared in the doorway, her keen eyes immediately assessing the atmosphere. "So," she said, looking between us. "I'm guessing the big reveal happened today?" Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "You knew about your mother's business activities?" "For about 2 years," Emma confirmed, helping herself to pasta. Mom didn't tell me directly, but I'm observant. Plus, I may have eavesdropped occasionally." "Apparently we're raising a corporate spy," I said dryly. "Good career option," Emma replied with a cheeky grin. "So are you guys getting divorced, or what?" "Emma!" I exclaimed, shocked by her bluntness. Daniel's laugh surprised me, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from him in months. "Direct as always," he said to our daughter. "The answer is, we don't know yet. We're talking things through." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. "Well, while you figure it out, can I just say that I think it's pretty cool that Mom secretly built a business empire? It's like a movie plot." "Hardly an empire," I demurred. "Ascend is still relatively small compared to the major investment firms." "You outperformed most of them," Daniel pointed out, surprising me again with this acknowledgement. "And you did it while maintaining a home and raising a remarkable daughter. That's extraordinary, Rebecca." The compliment warmed something in me that had been cold for too long. Not because I needed his validation, but because it suggested he might be capable of seeing me with new eyes, of relearning who I was rather than clinging to who he thought I should be. As we settled into an unexpectedly normal family dinner, the three of us falling into familiar patterns despite the day's revelations, I realized that whatever happened next, the most important victory had already been won. I had reclaimed my identity, my capabilities, my voice. The woman who had once been dismissed as just a housewife had transformed that dismissal into the foundation of unexpected success. Daniel and I had many conversations ahead. Difficult, honest discussions about respect, partnership, and the future of our marriage. But for the first time in years, those conversations would happen between equals, each fully seen by the other. Whether that led to reconciliation or separation remained to be seen, but either way, I would never again surrender my identity to someone else's limited perception. As Emma regaled us with stories from her day at school, I caught Daniel watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in years, not the absent acknowledgement of a busy husband, but the focused interest of someone discovering something new and unexpected. It reminded me fleetingly of how he had looked at me when we first met, before success and routine had dulled his curiosity. Perhaps, I thought cautiously, there was something worth rediscovering between us after all. 5 years had passed since that pivotal meeting in the Next Gen conference room. I stood at the window of my downtown office, gazing at the city skyline as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows between buildings. On my desk sat the finalized paperwork for Ascend Capital's newest venture fund, our third and largest to date, with $250 million in committed capital from institutional investors who now eagerly sought our partnership. The journey since revealing my identity to Daniel had been neither simple nor predictable. That day in the conference room had changed everything between us, forcing both of us to confront truths about ourselves and our marriage that had remained unexamined for too long. When the acquisition meetings concluded that afternoon, Daniel and I had driven home separately, the weight of unfinished conversation hanging between us. At home, after Emma had gone to bed, we talked until dawn, really talked, for the first time in years. The conversation was raw, painful, revealing layers of resentment and misunderstanding that had accumulated like sediment beneath the surface of our marriage. "I never meant to dismiss you," Daniel had said, his voice hoarse from hours of emotional discussion. "I thought I was protecting you from stress, from having to worry about financial matters." "I didn't need protection," I'd responded. "I needed respect. Partnership." "When did we stop being partners?" he'd asked, the genuine confusion in his voice revealing how completely he had missed the gradual erosion of our connection. I'd told him then, without anger but with unflinching honesty, about the countless small moments when he had treated my opinions as trivial, when he had planned our future without meaningful consultation, when he had responded to my attempts at intellectual engagement with patronizing tolerance. He had listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time in years. The following months had been turbulent. Daniel struggled to reconcile the confident investment partner he'd encountered in the conference room with the wife he thought he knew. His pride had been wounded, his assumptions shattered. There were arguments, moments of connection, and periods of uncertainty as we negotiated the new terrain of our relationship. Professionally, the challenges were equally complex. Daniel remained at Meridian as Chief Innovation Officer under the new ownership structure, while I continued my role at Ascend Capital. The overlapping business interests created potential conflicts that required careful navigation and strict ethical boundaries. We established clear protocols for handling Meridian-related matters at Ascend, with me recusing myself from decisions that directly affected Daniel's division. Emma, now a college sophomore studying finance and computer science, had weathered the transformation of our family with remarkable resilience. If anything, watching her parents redefine their relationship had strengthened her own sense of identity and possibility. "You showed me that it's never too late to reclaim your power," she told me during a recent visit home. "That's worth more than any inheritance." A knock at my office door interrupted my reflections. Vivian entered without waiting for a response, a habit from years of partnership that had evolved into deep friendship. "The Wilson meeting went well," she announced, dropping into one of the chairs facing my desk. "They're in for $20 million on the new fund." "That puts us over target," I noted, pleased but not surprised. Ascend's consistent performance had created demand that now allowed us to be selective about our investment partners. Indeed, it does. Vivian studied me with the perceptiveness that had made her both an exceptional friend and business partner. You're looking particularly reflective today. Anniversary? I smiled, appreciating her intuition. Of a sort. 5 years since the Meridian acquisition. 5 years since you stopped hiding your light, she completed. Are you and Daniel doing anything to mark the occasion? The question was casual, but loaded with implicit understanding of how complicated this particular milestone might be for us. The acquisition that had forced the reckoning in our marriage remained both a wound and a turning point. Actually, yes, I replied. He's taking me to dinner tonight, at Castellano's. Vivian's eyebrows rose. The scene of the original crime? Bold choice. I laughed at her dramatic phrasing. His idea, surprisingly. He said something about replacing bad memories with better ones. Speaking of Daniel, Vivian said, glancing at her watch, isn't he presenting at the tech conference downtown this afternoon? Thought you might be attending. I watched the live stream earlier, I explained. His presentation on Meridian's new adaptive intelligence platform was impressive. The stock is already up 3% since the announcement. This casual monitoring of each other's professional achievements had become our new normal, supportive but no longer enmeshed, interested without overstepping. We had learned to maintain the delicate balance between our shared personal life and our separate professional identities. After Vivian left, I finished reviewing the final documents for the new fund before preparing to leave for the evening. Daniel had texted earlier confirming our 7:30 reservation. As I gathered my things, my phone lit up with another message from him. Wrapped up early. Meeting you there? Or should I come to your office? The fact that he asked rather than assumed felt significant. One of the countless small adjustments he had made as we rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing. Meet you there, I replied. Looking forward to it. The drive to Castellano's stirred memories both painful and poignant. The restaurant had been the site of Daniel's proposal 15 years earlier, the scene of countless anniversary celebrations, and most significantly, the place where he had dismissed me as just a housewife, words that had catalyzed my transformation from supportive spouse to independent businesswoman. Daniel was waiting at the entrance when I arrived, his tall figure easily distinguished among the evening crowd. At 45, his dark hair was now threaded with silver at the temples, adding a distinguished quality that complemented the more thoughtful man he had become. His face brightened when he saw me approach, the smile reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't during those distant years when career success had hardened him. You look beautiful, he said, kissing me lightly before opening the door. The compliment was genuine, without the distracted quality that had once characterized his attentiveness. Inside, the maître d' led us to a corner table, the same one. I realized with a start, where Daniel had proposed all those years ago, the symmetry couldn't be coincidental. You requested this table specifically, I observed as we settled into our seats. Daniel nodded, a hint of nervousness visible beneath his usual confidence. I thought it was appropriate, full circle in a way. Once we had ordered drinks, his usual scotch, my preferred Cabernet, Daniel reached across the table to take my hand. The gesture felt both familiar and fresh, like many aspects of our recalibrated relationship. 5 years ago, he began, his voice quiet but steady. Our marriage was effectively over, though neither of us had admitted it yet. I had become so consumed by building Meridian, so certain of my own importance, that I'd stopped seeing you, really seeing you. Then suddenly, there you were across a conference table, forcing me to confront how completely I'd underestimated you. I squeezed his hand gently, acknowledging the truth of his words without interrupting the rare moment of vulnerability. That day was the most humbling of my life, he continued. But also, in retrospect, one of the most important. It forced me to question not just how I saw you, but how I saw myself. The story I'd been telling about my success, my role as husband and father, everything. The waiter arrived with our drinks, pausing Daniel's reflection momentarily. When we were alone again, I found myself responding with equal candor. "I was so angry with you for so long," I admitted, "not just for dismissing me professionally, but for gradually edging me out of any meaningful partnership in our marriage. Building Ascend was initially about proving something to myself, that I was more than the box you'd put me in. It wasn't until later that I realized it had become about more than vindication. It had become about rediscovering who I was meant to be all along." Daniel nodded, absorbing my words without defensiveness, another change from the man he had been 5 years ago. The irony is that the woman I fell in love with was exactly that person. Brilliant, driven, uncompromising. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that your primary value was in supporting my ambitions rather than pursuing your own. We both made mistakes, I acknowledged. I retreated into secrecy instead of confronting the problem directly. I allowed resentment to build instead of demanding the respect I deserved. "Well," Daniel said, raising his glass in a toast, "here's to second chances and hard-earned wisdom. 5 years of rebuilding what we nearly destroyed." I clinked my glass against his, appreciating the milestone without romanticizing the difficult path we had traveled. The rebuilding of our marriage had not been a fairy tale reconciliation, but a deliberate, sometimes painful process of relearning each other as equals. There had been setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, sessions with a marriage counselor who helped us navigate the complex terrain of trust and autonomy. As we ordered dinner, the conversation shifted to Emma's latest academic achievements and the innovative work emerging from Daniel's division at Meridian. The ease of our interaction reflected years of practice in balancing personal and professional boundaries, no longer compartmentalizing our lives as we once had, but respecting the distinct spheres of influence we each maintained. "I have something for you," Daniel said as we finished our entrees. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small box, sliding it across the table toward me. Inside was not jewelry as I had half expected, but a key, sleek, modern, unfamiliar. "What's this?" I asked, turning it over in my hand. "The key to a new chapter," he replied, an uncharacteristic hint of uncertainty in his expression. "I've been offered the position of Chief Technology Officer at Visionary Laboratories in Austin. It would mean relocating, starting fresh in many ways." I stared at the key, processing the implications of his announcement. "This is a significant move. Why didn't you mention it sooner?" "Because I wanted to discuss it with you as a genuine choice, not a foregone conclusion," he explained. "The old Daniel would have accepted immediately, assuming you would simply adjust your life around mine. I wanted to approach this differently." The key, I now understood, represented not just a potential new home, but a symbol of partnership, of decisions made together rather than imposed by one upon the other. "What about Meridian?" I asked, practical considerations immediately surfacing. "And Ascend? We've both established strong professional foundations here. Vivian has already assured me that Ascend could easily establish an Austin office if you wanted," Daniel said, revealing that he had indeed given this considerable thought. "As for me, this role at Visionary would allow me to focus on pure innovation rather than corporate management, the work I find most fulfilling." I weighed his words carefully, appreciating both the opportunity he described and the way he presented it, as a shared decision rather than an executive decree. "The key?" I prompted, still curious about its specific significance. Daniel smiled. "To a condo I've put a refundable deposit on. It has beautiful office space overlooking the river. I thought it could serve as Ascend's Austin headquarters if we decide to make the move. The residential portion is just a starting point. We would choose our actual home together. 5 years ago, such a proposition would have felt like an imposition, a unilateral decision disguised as a choice. Now, it felt genuinely collaborative, Daniel creating possibilities while leaving space for my full participation in shaping our future. I'd need to visit Austin, I said thoughtfully. Meet with Vivian about the logistics of establishing a satellite office. Research the local investment landscape. Of course, he agreed readily. I have 30 days to give Visionary my decision. Plenty of time for due diligence. The business terminology was deliberately playful, acknowledging our shared professional language. As we moved to dessert, our conversation explored the potential of this new direction. The professional opportunities for both of us in Austin's growing tech ecosystem, the personal appeal of a fresh start in a vibrant city, the practical considerations of relocating when Emma was established at university. What struck me most was not the specific opportunity, but the transformation it represented in our marriage. 5 years earlier, Daniel had viewed my career as secondary, my input as optional. Now, he approached major life decisions as genuinely collaborative, recognizing that our paths forward needed to accommodate both our ambitions. When the check arrived, Daniel reached for it automatically, then paused. Another small but telling adjustment to old patterns. "Split it?" he suggested with a smile that acknowledged the symbolism of the gesture. I nodded, appreciating both the practical equality and the recognition of how far we had come. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought us from that disastrous anniversary dinner to this moment of genuine partnership. The woman who had once been dismissed as just a housewife now co-led a successful investment firm. The husband who had once been blinded by his own importance had learned to see his wife as an equal, not an accessory. Neither transformation had been easy or complete. We both still stumbled occasionally into old habits of thought or behavior. But the direction of our growth, both individually and as a couple, gave me confidence in the path ahead. Outside Castellanos, the night air was crisp with early autumn. Daniel took my hand as we walked toward the parking area, the simple connection feeling both familiar and newly significant. "So," he said, glancing at me sideways, "Austin, you'll think about it?" "I'll think about it," I confirmed. "But Daniel?" "Yes? Whatever we decide together. Equal partners, equal voices." He squeezed my hand in agreement. I wouldn't have it any other way. Not anymore. As we reached our separate cars, another small symbol of our maintained independence, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed from that moment when Daniel had casually dismissed me across a dinner table. The journey from underestimated wife to respected businesswoman had been challenging, sometimes painful, but ultimately affirming. The greatest victory, I realized, wasn't in proving Daniel wrong, or even in building Ascend Capital into a successful firm. It was in reclaiming my own sense of possibility, in remembering that no one else's perception could define the limits of my capabilities. That lesson, hard-won through years of secret work and eventual confrontation, was one I hoped to pass on to Emma and to the young women I now mentored through Ascend's leadership program. Daniel and I had found our way back to each other, not as the couple we had once been, but as something new, more honest, more equal, more conscious of the effort required to maintain genuine partnership. Whether our next chapter unfolded, in Austin or elsewhere, I felt confident that we would write it together, neither of us relegated to the margins of the other's story. The woman once dismissed as just a housewife had reclaimed her narrative, and in doing so, had helped rewrite the story of her marriage into something neither she nor her husband could have imagined on that fateful anniversary night. Something more challenging, more authentic, and ultimately more fulfilling than the comfortable inequality they had once accepted without question. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.